Welcome to the HIV podcast. Each week we focus on a person, historical event or pop culture moment linked to HIV and explore the story of what actually happened. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Jess, and between us we've been working in the field of HIV for 40 years. Our aim is to get as many people as possible HIV educated. Okay, welcome to the HIV podcast. I've got some exciting news for you.
Yes.
We have been, you aren't aware of this yet, but it's only just been announced, Sarah. We've been shortlisted for a British Podcast Award.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's amazing, actually.
Yeah, in the wellbeing category, so that's exciting. Yes, so it's the 26th of September, but, you know, very exciting.
Yes, excellent. More new clothes. How? Oh, well, that's a nice way to start the episode. Right.
Also, the other news that I have are someone came up with a good rhyme for your name, which is Sarah, the bearer of bad news.
What bad news have I been sharing?
I don't know, but someone on TikTok suggested that. It
Good.
rhymes, though. You asked for a rhyme. It's a good rhyme.
But Sarah, the bearer
of bad news. You could call yourself Sarah, the bearer of good news, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I'm concerned now. I don't think I do share bad news that often. I moan a lot.
Maybe it's a new avenue. You've been doctor, you've been an astronaut, I'm sure at some point, philosopher, historian. Now, bearer of bad news at the end.
Oh, I don't want to bear bad news.
Okay,
no.
Well,
Good
someone
news.
else, this isn't about your nickname, but someone else, Lorna, lovely Lorna McCardle, used to get called Mow the Lawn at school. Doesn't even rhyme, but I like, because her name's Lorna, like lawn, the lawn.
Oh, I see.
Mm.
Oh, Lorna.
I know, it's a good one, isn't it? I like that one.
It is a good one, but it doesn't do her justice at all.
But
in any way, shape, or form.
I appreciated people sharing. I really did. But yeah, this week, do you have any news?
No.
You've got none that will beat the British Podcast Awards, I tell you.
No, I haven't. Oh, no, nothing could compete with that. No, I have nothing.
So this week, our episode is all about International AIDS Conference. And so people will be aware that that's been happening all week, and it's over in Germany. And we have been attending virtually, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
So today, what we're going to do is just give people a little bit of an overview of what's been happening, or some interesting parts that we thought people might want to hear about. Yeah?
I don't think about anyone wanting to hear my bits. I just chose the bits I liked. That's how selfish I am.
No, but I think that's a good way forward. If you like them, then other people must.
Hope so. Okay. Do you want a quick overview first?
Go on then.
The International AIDS Society.
Yes.
Because they host this.
Yeah.
So they unite the global HIV response because they believe progress happens when science, policy and activism come together, which is absolutely true. And their aims are to bring together leading minds to accelerate scientific discovery. I feel I should be a part of that. They also advocate for evidence-based and stigma-free policies. Yes, nice. Excellent. And they educate change makers to ensure the global HIV response follows the science and puts people first. Very, very important. And they do this. Well, one of the ways they do this is by hosting HIV conferences, not just the International AIDS Conference, which is what we've been at all week, but also there's a science conference, there's an HIV research conference. They do a lot of other stuff as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they have things like they have a program for global HIV vaccine enterprise. They're quite pioneering, really. They're kind of leading the way in all areas of kind of HIV. So the first conference was held in 1985 in Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
But it was coordinated by the World Health Organization and the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. You know, they're one of my favorite organizations, Jess.
Yeah.
IAS formed in 1988 and the first conference was held the next year. And they now have over 13,000 members living with, affected by or working on HIV.
Wow.
Good on them.
That is pretty awesome. Do you have more? You sounds like you've got more facts. No,
those are the only facts I have.
Right. Well, I'm going to start us off because I attended the opening ceremony.
Oh, was it good?
Yeah, it was lovely. I'm going to tell you about it. Literally going to tell you some of my little highlights from it. So they opened, which was really lovely, with holding a minute's silence. And they said that WHO, obviously the World Health Organization, has recorded over 430 attacks on health services globally in 2024 alone. Well over half have occurred in Gaza, and well over a quarter recorded in the Ukraine. And so they held a minute's silence to commemorate all of the healthcare workers who have lost their lives in 2024. And if you think that's a massive amount of attacks, and we're only in July, 430 attacks so far. So that's how it opened, which was obviously very moving. And then Professor Sharon Lewin, she talked about, and this is something you've talked about a lot, Sarah, so, you're up there with old Professor Lewin. So she talked about how the 2030 target is slipping away. So that's the 2030 target of getting to zero new HIV transmissions. And she says, yeah, it's slipping away from us for lots of different factors. But she also highlighted as one of them, there's increasing resistance to HIV medication in Africa.
Is there?
Yeah. And that's a worry, isn't it? Because again, like we've said before, HIV is sort of like a fairly new illness in some respects. So we haven't got this like long-term, people that have been on meds for, decades and decades and decades, and then we know what actually happens when. And will we change? Will we evolve biologically like this to have resistance? I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And then Andrei Klepikov came out, and he was saying, and this is quite shocking. Okay, you ready for this? I'm going to quote him. It's estimated that 2 million people are living with HIV in our region, and the region he is talking about is Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So he said it's estimated that 2 million people are living with HIV in our region, and only 50% are on treatment, on antiretroviral treatment, nowhere near the global target of 95%. And he said, why is this? Why is every second person living with HIV left without HIV treatment?
Did he have the answer?
No, I was going to say no, because it's like
or
an
was he
opener.
just asking it?
Yeah, they're just posing questions, I suppose, aren't they? To say, look, this is happening. He called it, he said, I'm sounding a siren. This is a global alert to draw people's attention to this. I mean, possibly is part of it to do with, wars and things like that. Do you know what I mean? You just don't know. And then Winnie Bianima who's the executive director of UNAIDS Global. So she's from Uganda, and she had said that she was talking about her country. She said, when they announce that they're going to hunt down LGBTQ people as criminals simply for who they are, who they love, it's no surprise that those people will not walk up to a clinic to get life-saving preventative treatment. Punitive approaches are driving LGBTQ plus people, sex workers, people who use drugs, and other marginalized groups away from services. And she is right. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
There were some really, really powerful speeches in this opening segment. Obviously, it was very long, so I'm not going to tell you all about the 3 hours of it. And then my favourite part of all, well, one of my favourite parts, the first ever queer, right, I'm going to have to try and say this properly, Shruklala group did a dance, and it was traditional. It was a traditional dance from Bavaria, right? Think your most Bavarian dance. Think lederhosen, knee slapping, hats with feathers. They were amazing. So they closed the opening ceremony.
Oh, how lovely.
They were awesome. And I actually messaged them to say, I've just watched you in the opening ceremony and you are brilliant. So go and check them out. I'll try and put a link below this episode for some of their YouTube videos, because honestly, I was like, this is kind of crazy to have there, but how brilliant. It was so wonderful. So love that. And Sarah, thank God we're covering this, because I don't know if you know, there are people attending from 170 countries from across the world. So thank God we are, because we're helping that other 9 countries that we're in get a bit of impact.
Oh, get involved.
Helping those extra 9. So that was the opening ceremony.
Lovely. Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was. So what did you attend?
So I attended a few things. Do you know what I like? Just dipping in and out of everything.
Yeah.
But one of the first ones that I attended was looking at how strong leadership and smart investment are reducing HIV-related stigma and discrimination. And we're very keen to reduce stigma here in the UK, in Berkshire and Hampshire, where we operate. So interesting. And it was people from around the world. It was actually from countries that have committed to end stigma by 2030. One of those countries is Ukraine. I think Ukraine is just amazing. I think the people that spoke at this conference, and I've seen a few of them, they're so passionate and they're so driven. And one of the ladies that spoke at this seminar was called Valeria, and she's from 100% Life, the largest HIV patient organisation in Ukraine. And when she stood up to speak, she held up a brick, and it was a brick from the bond remains of the Ukraine Children's Hospital. And I swear you could hear a pin drop because everyone's like, why is she holding a brick? And when she said where it was from, everyone's just like, and then she just dropped it on the floor and she explained. They received money from the Global Fund, the HIV Global Fund, to build a bomb shelter. That funding meant that all the HIV children in the hospital survived when that hospital was bombed. In fact, not just the positive children, all the children survived. And she's trying to highlight like the power of the HIV community, the power of funding, and how, it doesn't just help the HIV community, it can help everybody. And when you're talking about stigma, that's so true.
Yeah.
Many groups experience stigma, not just the HIV community. And there was almost a common theme through this seminar around needing government input. If you want to change the culture of your country or the stigma that people experience, it needs to be kind of a top-down approach. You need your government on board, but not in a tick box way. And this came through very strongly. We're talking about people's lives. They're absolutely right. Next up, someone from Angola. Similar approach to Ukraine in terms of getting government on board and then kind of letting everything filter down to grassroots level. And then there was an interlude. I've never seen an interlude in an IAC seminar before, but it was amazing. It was a poetry reading. It was performed by Bakita Casada, who's from the UK. It was amazing. And I think, again, it is one of those pin drop moments where everybody kind of just stops. Because you always find with conferences, don't you? There's background noise, isn't there? People hear things and they're, oh, yeah, that's good. People are making notes. Everybody just stopped. Yeah. It's good.
Oh,
very
wow.
good. Love Bakita. And then we're back to hearing from more countries. So Thailand, Spain and Jamaica. So we know that Thailand, from our 2030 episodes, that Thailand's government isn't very supportive. They've reduced funding for HIV. So it wasn't surprising to hear that most of their stigma funding comes from international funding, not local. I mean, they're really up against it. Spain's biggest obstacle was their Conservative government. I didn't realise this was a worldwide thing. Much as our Conservative government wasn't particularly supportive of HIV and stigma, this is across the world.
Oh, wow.
When the government changed in Spain, so did the support for the HIV community. And their message really was, don't give up with your campaigning. It doesn't matter who's in power because it can change. And when it changes, the new government might be more supportive of your plans for, HIV stigma strategy.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in Spain. It got implemented and it got funded. And then Jamaica, I think probably one of the most passionate people I've ever seen talking about community empowerment and saying that, and we've said this before, I think, on the podcast about people with HIV being proud, but also recognising the fact that they deserve funding. It isn't just that, you should do it because it's a good thing. These are actual people, they're actually living with HIV and they deserve to be funded. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So he worked for an organisation called JN Plus. And he was talking about how grassroots organisations have to build skills to ask for funding. We know all about that. And also the challenges of accessing multi-year funding. We know all about that too. And the fact that it can feel like you're going around with a begging bowl to get funds. Fund us properly. Give us multi-year funding. We can come up with a strategy. We're really good at stuff like that and we'll definitely deliver. Don't make us go around begging. And then they had someone from the Global Fund who said he was hearing loud and clear that funding is not enough and that she understands that funding has the ability to touch hearts and minds. And Jamaica, and I didn't get their name, but I loved them because they really got the whole room supporting them, said, what we need is a revolution. It's more than money. It's our lives. And I was like, yes, Jamaica.
Oh, I hope they got a standing ovation for that one.
Room went wild.
Oh, really? Good.
And then they finished with stigma pledges. People could take to the stage and just share their pledge. And actually, some of those pledges, very moving, very personal.
I bet. But the only thing with that is, like, how long would you be there for? Because you can't stop people from making a stigma pledge. I feel like, I'm not going to lie, I love the idea of that if it's pre-planned. But that could get out of hand. You could be there for a long, and you can't leave. I'm not going to leave while someone's making a stigma pledge. Do you know what I mean? So
No, I know.
risky. That's risky.
It was good though. It felt empowering. There were questions as well. I have to ask, why, when people ask questions at things like this, do they make the questions so long and complicated?
I suppose sometimes some things just can't be concise.
Yeah, maybe. But I was like, oh, I don't think I'd be able to answer some of what they were asked, but they all did fantastically well. And you know, what did I learn from this? Funding is needed around the world. We're all facing the same challenges, be it through government, be it through public attitudes, and funding is obviously key to addressing all of this. But what else came out, and a really strong message for me, is that community activism is kind of unwavering. No, we're never going to give up in our quest to eliminate stigma here at TVPS, and nor is anyone else around the world. Good on them.
Yeah, very nice.
Excellent. So that's seminar 1, Jess.
Okay.
Seminar 2 is all about community leadership. 40 years of community leadership. And do you know what? Bit bittersweet, if I'm honest.
Oh.
So they're celebrating all the good work that's been done, but also the challenges in doing so. So, you know, some areas of the world are fragile. All areas are affected by the global economy. Then there's funding, a recurrent theme through everything I went to. Actually, being more accurate, the lack of funding. There isn't any money anywhere. So this was a good one for us because obviously we are a community organisation. And they really were celebrating kind of the resilience and the necessity of community organisations. So this was more a general discussion with people kind of commenting. And one thing that struck me was someone who spoke from an African organisation that supports sex workers, highlighting we want to fight for communities. We must look at all communities and be inclusive. Also, discussions around how we secure community funding, especially with 2030 in sight. Some countries don't fund any community-based funding at all. And mention again about governments, far-right governments. I don't know if you saw this in the things that you went to, but there was definite themes through all the seminars around leadership, government leadership, funding, having to be extremely resilient and innovative in approach, which I find quite depressing. If the whole world is experiencing this, and as you said earlier from the opening ceremony, a lot of concern about 2030.
Yeah, masses. I heard loads of that. I mean, yeah, there were that was the sort of the biggest thing because I think everyone's really worried.
I think so. And you have to ask, well, I will ask, with everything that I've heard from all over the world, people speaking from all over the world about, you know, the things I've just mentioned, is it right that there is pressure on community groups, on grassroots organisations to achieve 2030?
I don't know. It just seems very, like you're saying, it's an added pressure in a world of 1,000 pressures right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's clearly playing on everyone's mind, but maybe it's time to kind of relook at those priorities.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I wonder when that happens. I wonder when someone says we actually need to have a chat about, do you know what I mean? And look at how realistic these goals are.
Yeah, because the landscape's changed, hasn't it? A lot has happened since this was first talked about in 2020, 2021. Huge things have changed. So I don't know, you know, who decides that they would just keep ploughing on? I mean, and it's good to have it on the agenda, absolutely. And it's good kind of focal point, but we also need to be realistic.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so from that one, again, a very strong message. We are all in this together. Somebody said we must defend life despite the politics, and they're very right.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's easy, isn't it, at the moment to get caught up in the politics. And we should, you know, obviously there's so much going on in the world, and we should keep informed about that.
Oh, I think, I think we have to, because I think obviously it's a concern, isn't it? Because the further right we are going, it has an impact on everything, not just sort of with funding and HIV, but literally our civil liberties. And, you know, it's going to have this big knock-on effect. So we do need to definitely stay ahead of the curve with that.
Yeah, I think so. So again, just really inspiring. There are so many people out there fighting for our HIV community.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing, I think, about the whole event. Just how many people there are out there just doing the most amazing work in the world of HIV.
Yes. So I left there empowered and ready to take on the world.
Okay. Were you ready to take on your third one?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
I was on a roll by now. Whizzing around all over the place, virtually, obviously, just sat in my bedroom. But the next one was around mental health. Very interesting topic for us because we have seen an increase in people with mental health issues over the last few years.
Okay.
This was a seminar where studies were presented. Wasn't prepared for the first one, so brace yourself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was a study in South Africa of 611 children. 190 were orphaned by AIDS. 211 were orphaned by COVID, and 210 who had no loss. And what they're looking at is how mental health and suicidal thoughts and feelings across 2 pandemics.
Right.
And they interviewed these children and they asked them about several areas, things like emotional care, personal care, sibling care, household management, and mental health. And what they discovered is across all 3 groups, there were similar levels of poverty and turbulence. And some of that turbulence obviously related to the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
In terms of stigma, 30% of the children were teased for losing a parent to AIDS. That was much higher than those that were teased from the COVID group.
Oh my God.
I know. They looked at the coping mechanisms that those children used for the stigma they were experiencing, and they included running away or alcohol. They compared that to the COVID group, and they found their coping mechanism focused much more on just hanging out with what they called the wrong people, so getting into the wrong crowd.
Right.
The mental health impact was higher in terms of depression in the COVID group, but higher anxiety in the AIDS group. But thoughts around suicide were much higher in the AIDS group. 1 in 10 children wished they were dead.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Isn't it? Now, this study it was highlighting the disparities. It's not about this is what we're going to do next. This is saying this situation has occurred.
Yeah.
These are the differences between these cohorts. Really stark results. Poor children.
God, isn't it? That's where, see, this is where we're hearing about these really interesting reports. Do you know what? I had so many ideas while I've been attending, and obviously we're still attending, for different podcast ideas, because I was like things like that. We're like, oh my God, we should look into that more. And then there's a report over here, and then there's this amazing person over there. I feel like it's never ending. If we ever need more inspiration, Sarah, which I don't think we will, let's just think about when we visited the International AIDS Conference.
I know. I think we should just feature different organisations around the world. They are brimming with ideas. So that was interesting. Then we moved to Uganda, where they've introduced a mindfulness programme for young people living with HIV as they transition into adulthood. What good idea. They're monitoring kind of depression and mental health in young people, and they were accessing mindfulness over a 4-week period. And it was a young persons led initiative. And because it was young persons led, it was really successful because of their input. So that was really interesting to hear. And then the last speaker was talking about peer led interventions in Tanzania. And it's looking at peer group leaders and how they support young people. So they found that peer-trained leaders were beneficial for young people. So what they did was they recruited peer leaders who were HIV positive themselves, and then they paired them up with an HIV positive young person. Peer supporter or peer leader became a really good role model for that young person. And they had a programme of what they discussed. So the peer support was structured, and they're looking at stress, worries, discussing difficult memories, stigma, disclosure, and moving on positively. And they used a range of methods across that peer support, including CBT. And this study did have results because it showed that the peer supporters benefited from sharing their lived experience. That increased their own self-esteem, and it made them feel they were doing something very worthwhile. Also helped the young people because it gave them hope for the future and a really strong role model, an adult living with HIV and living well with HIV. Yeah. So this was a lovely study to hear about. There were some challenges around the peer supporters hearing about some very, very difficult life events from the young person that would never be easy to deal with. And also maintaining those boundaries, which I think can occur with any peer support as you go through the programme and you develop a strong relationship. So for me, again, such an interesting seminar. The main takeout from that is if you're going to anything like this, any type of intervention that involves a positive person, get their input, get your service users' input, because it'll be successful because of them. And they can share their lived experience, which I think is so important and sometimes so undervalued.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's just worth its weight in gold, isn't it? That kind of input.
It is. And although the first presentation was really, really sad, it did make me think when we talk about stigma, we don't always think about children that experience it too. So maybe there's something in that for us to consider for TVPS in the future. So there you are. That was a bit of a whistle-stop tour.
That was.
International AIDS conference experience. It's been so good so far.
Yeah, and it's like we said, it's still going, it's still happening, and we are still reporting from it. And obviously later on today, I'll have the closing ceremony that I'm going to. And then next week, we're going to do another follow-up episode on, because there's been so much, we couldn't just do one. There's so much we've learned.
Yeah.
So it should be exciting to have another whole episode about this.
Very good. Oh, look, we've just finished and the emails come through to me to say congratulations on a podcast shortlisted something or other.
There you go.
Oh, I won't take it personally that you got yours before I got mine.
I didn't. I looked it up.
How did you know?
I looked it up.
They announce it publicly and then they tell us.
Yeah, I just happened to go onto their British Podcast Awards. Someone had said to me, I think they're announcing it today. And I was like, today? So I went on there to have a little look and it said shortlist announced. So literally just before I spoke to you, I found out.
Oh, it's so exciting.
But yeah, so, it's our second award nomination this year. First the ARIAs, now the British Podcast Awards. And as judges ourselves, we know that it's actually not easy to get a nomination for the British Podcast Awards. So that's quite a huge accolade.
It absolutely is. They get tons of applications, don't they? Applications, is that right? Submissions, maybe, might be a better word.
Exciting times. I know. Well, look, have a lovely holiday and off you go to more International AIDS Conference stuff and to go and have a little celebration of our award nomination.
Thanks for listening to the HIV podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please like, rate and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
You can now also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the HIV Podcast for behind the scenes insights and video. The HIV Podcast is produced by Thames Valley Positive Support.